So we'll start with House Bill 1171 and hear from Representative Power.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable committee members. As the prime sponsor, I appreciate the opportunity to introduce to you today House Bill 1171. For the record, I am Representative Diane Power. I represent the towns of Brookline and Mason in Hillsborough County, District 26. House Bill 1171 exempts certain niche beauty services from occupational and shop licensure requirements. Niche beauty services are specialized services. They are limited in scope, they are inherently safe, they do not use potentially dangerous chemicals or tools, and notably, niche beauty services involve skills that are primarily taught and learned outside of cosmetology schools in New Hampshire, as the Board of Cosmetology does not require schools to teach niche beauty services, and these skills are commonly practiced by regular people every day in their own homes, as supplies and tools are readily accessible and are purchased by people every day. In fact, most of us here currently have in our homes some or most of the items used by niche beauty providers, and we most likely have used them already today. Niche beauty services covered in this bill include blow-dry styling of hair, eyelash extension application, makeup application, and threading, a type of hair removal. The problem that this bill addresses is as follows. Under current New Hampshire law, individuals who desire to provide niche beauty services to clients must spend thousands of dollars to attend cosmetology school and earn hundreds of educational credit hours. In New Hampshire, the average cosmetology program costs over $19,000. And in order to become licensed, there is a $104 practical exam fee and an $88 written exam fee. And these exams are only administered in the English language. Additionally, in terms of time, 1,500 educational hours are required for cosmetology licensure, whereas in comparison, a mere minimum of 150 educational hours are required for EMT licensure. That's 1/10 of the cosmetology licensure requirement. Consequently, individuals who want to offer niche beauty services to clients and earn an honest living, not working underground, are forced to invest substantial time and money, oftentimes incurring significant financial debt, in order to attend a cosmetology program in which niche beauty skills aren't even taught. Undoubtedly, this is time-consuming, costly, and unjustifiable. The solution that this bill provides is straightforward. First, this bill defines the limited scope of practice for niche beauty service providers to include the following 4 services: blow-dry styling, eyelash extension application, makeup application, and threading. And second, this bill exempts these 4 specific niche beauty services from individual and shop licensure requirements. In short, House Bill 1171 is merely an extension of the 2017 legislation exempting hair braiding from regulation by the Board of Barbering, Cosmetology, and Aesthetics, which is now in statute. In conclusion, this bill removes the unnecessary red tape for individuals seeking to work in the niche beauty services industry. This bill also serves to create new employment and business opportunities in the Granite State by exempting these 4 niche beauty services from licensure requirements, similar to exempting hair braiding, as was done in New Hampshire in 2017. And lastly, this bill upholds the current laws for the practice of licensed barbering, cosmetology, and aesthetic professionals. That concludes my bill introduction. Mr. Chair, I am happy to answer any questions at this time if you permit.
Are you aware of any statutory definition of niche?
No, not in New Hampshire, and this bill defines that.
Questions from the committee? Go ahead, thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your testimony. So I want to ask about eyelash extension because the eye is, very important, and I would think you have to have the background to know if someone has any eye disease that would prevent the eyelash extension or a sensitivity to, or allergy to the glue. And I'm assuming that you use a sharp tool near the eye to put the eyelash extensions on. So I would assume that it requires proper training.
Thank you for the question, Senator. So nothing in this bill precludes an individual from becoming certified or obtaining the education and the knowledge in order to be an eyelash extension provider or to lash. So additionally, this bill provides that a person who is being hired to lash, it is the responsibility of the shop owner to ensure the skills and the knowledge, and also to and the knowledge that this person that they're hiring is in fact competent and able. That's similar to any hiring process. There's an interview and the questions are asked. So yes, and also I might also emphasize that niche beauty services, by and large, for example, eyelash extension is not a required curriculum within the state of New Hampshire. Therefore, even a licensed cosmetologist would need to seek education and training outside of the standard schooling for cosmetology in New Hampshire.
Thank you for clarifying.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question. So I'm assuming now anyone that has a license, any kind of shop you have to have insurance on your license to protect the consumer. If this passes and there's no license, where would the insurance be if something does happen to the consumer?
That would be a business decision. So I mean, if with regards to one of these niche beauty services providers, being hired by a licensed shop, then that would be part of the business practice and what is required. So additionally, if a niche beauty service provider, like for example, that wanted to, if this were to become law and they were to establish a shop to offer such services, then it would be their choice as far as their business model, what insurance that they held.
Thank you.
And I would also, excuse me, also add that a consumer, if they felt that, it was warranted and necessary, they can, they could sue the business. And also, I might add that the Board of Health could also shut down a business if there was an issue.
Thank you, Senator Reagan. And thank you, Representative, for coming before us this morning. So my concern really piggybacks onto both what Senator Ricciardi and what Senator Kavanaugh have mentioned. So the process of licensure has to do with public trust and public safety. And so when you are, when I think about this, especially when it comes to eyelashes, now I have not had, I've had an eyelash lift, I'll be honest about that. No, I didn't do it in my home, went to a licensed provider to have that done, but not had extensions put on. But they are near somebody's eyes, and sight in medicine is one of, we protect all parts of, the human body, but in medicine in particular, sight is so important to people. I'm uncomfortable letting or drawing back on a licensure requirement, especially for that particular area. I think loosening that, I guess I'm making more of a statement. I think loosening that requirement and taking it away from the individual, but focusing on the entire business and saying, we'll just sue the business if there's a problem. I think licensure upholds public trust, public standards, and if you go into that shop and have this service, you know that the person taking care of you or providing the service that they're being paid for is, at the highest level, and that they have met that requirement. And that is, pretty common across the board in terms of licensure in general. So that's just one area where I have, the eyes in particular, where I have a concern. I don't think that makeup is necessarily that simple, because somebody could have an allergic reaction to that. There are all different types of makeup and different types of complexions, and then knowing what a person might have, being able to screen them appropriately before application, I think is something that really matters and is up to that individual providing the service at that time. I understand what you're trying to do, and I appreciate it. I just want to put my concerns on the table now as we move forward. And I've heard from a lot of constituents about this.
Thank you for your comments. And I would like to add that having a license does not ensure that safety will be upheld. And furthermore, if a person, like I said, just please keep in mind that a person who is going to provide these services in an existing shop, it's the duty and responsibility of the shop owner, just as common, business sense, that they will ensure the skills and the ability and the knowledge of the person that they're hiring to provide a service in their shop, in their within their business, that they would be qualified, highly qualified. And there's nothing that prevents that, check from occurring within this bill. And secondly, I would also reiterate once again that in the cosmetology programs, eyelash extensions, up until now and for the most part, it's not part of the curriculum. Therefore, an individual that seeks to provide those services, they will go and get the training and the certification in order to provide those services. And the business owner, the shop owner, it's just common sense, good business practice as a business owner to make sure that the person that you're hiring to provide services knows what they're doing. And furthermore, I would also like to share that with regard to eyelash extensions, that the materials are developed and designed to be used in the eye area. And therefore, from that perspective, they're safe. It's not as though, the adhesive is super glue. It's not. It's ophthalmologically formulated to be used near the eye. And also, the amount of adhesive that's used is minuscule. The diameter of an eyelash extension ranges from 0.03 to 0.3 millimeters. And so therefore, the amount of adhesive that is applied to this extension is minuscule. It's not copious amounts. And I would also further add that the formulation of the adhesive is such that it is designed to bond to human hair. That would be the eyelash. So in general, the manufacturers of eyelash extensions, they've designed this product safely and with all these concerns in mind. So with common sense, the risk is very minimal. It's not like it's just somebody's going to walk off the street with supplies and say, oh, I'm just going to start doing this. That there's a lot of checking that goes along the way.
Quick follow-up, Senator Reagan?
Well,
And this I don't know, so I'm gonna, if you could help me out with this, Representative. Do the shops themselves have to be licensed?
There's two models within the framework of the bill that shops, people could, if this bill were to pass, they could be an eyelash extension provider, and that would be under a licensed shop if the shop owner desired to hire such a person. And additionally, part of the framework of this bill is that for these niche beauty services only, that shop licensure, yes, would be exempt. That's one of the provisions in this bill. So there's two paths forward, if you will. Do you understand?
So they don't have to be licensed?
Part of this bill, with regard to niche beauty services only, it exempts shop licensure, yes.
I'm done for now. Thank you, Senator Reagan.
okay. Thank you for your introduction.
Thank you.
Jessica Kalopoulides from OPLC.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jessica Kalopoulides. I am the Enforcement Division Director at the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification, and I am here on behalf of OPLC this morning. HB 1171, as currently drafted, seeks to carve out certain beauty services from licensure requirements. Licensure is currently required for these services as a means to protect the public. Removing the licensure requirement will result in unqualified individuals offering services to an unsuspecting public. When injured by one of these individuals who is unlicensed, the public will find further harm in that they cannot file a complaint with the Board of Barbering, Cosmetology, and Aesthetics. The member of the public in this situation would be limited to filing a complaint in civil court, which he or she may find too financially burdensome to pursue. In the meantime, there is nothing to prevent the unlicensed individual who caused the harm from continuing to provide these services to additional members of the public. Regulation through licensure serves the purpose of protecting the public. I believe that the efforts to exempt these services from licensure is, at least in part, an effort to lessen the regulation of these professions. I have an amendment for consideration by the committee which would meet that objective without placing the public at risk. Currently, individuals practicing professions of barbering, cosmetology, and aesthetics must be licensed. Shops and booths within shops must also be licensed. The amendment proposes to remove the requirement that booths be licensed. The amendment makes clear that booth rental arrangements within shops would still be permitted, as that is a longstanding practice. The shop itself would still need to be licensed, and the individuals practicing in these professions would still need to be licensed. For those operating as booth renters, they currently must have 2 licenses, and this would reduce that to 1 single license for those folks. This amendment of removing the requirement for booth licensure was presented to the Board of Barbering, Cosmetology, and Aesthetics at their last meeting, and it was approved by that board. Thank you for your time this morning. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I also have a copy of the amendment and a copy of my my spoken testimony in written form if you would like it.
This is not a good practice to surprise the committee with an amendment from an agency.
Mm-hmm.
So you should not do that again.
Understood.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Thank you. Is there someone designated to speak on behalf of all the members of the Empire Beauty School? Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Danielle Beauvais. I am the educational trainer for Empire Beauty Schools. I have been a licensed cosmetologist for 22 years and an educator within this field for the past 12 years. We as a school and myself personally are not in support of this bill. We stand behind the fact that our licensure protects and preserves the integrity of our field. We believe that it is necessary that all of our cosmetologists, barbers, and estheticians should uphold a licensure for the safety and infection control purposes that our field practices. We take great pride with every lesson that we teach, ensuring that our students of past and present are aware of all the safety measures that need to be taken in every application, whether it be a basic application or, as it's been said, a niche application. Pertaining to eyelash extensions particularly, this can be, as was brought up earlier, very dangerous if it is not a trained service. We are working within close proximity to the eye. The glue, I can speak from personal experience, can have reactions if not applied properly. I myself have received a reaction to not using a sensitized glue as opposed to a basic glue applicator that can be used. There are different types, and for someone who's administering this that does not know that there is a difference or know what to look for or the questions to ask, could be setting up this individual for a severe reaction, could ultimately glue someone's eye together just by not knowing how to do it. Although small amounts of glue are applied to each end, it is still important to know how much. Too much glue applied can cause clumping, irritations. There can be bacterial growth that can happen on the eyelashes themselves, which ultimately can result in some cases in loss of vision. That's serious. Although it's not underneath our state board licensure requirement, it is a certification program which individuals do need to go through and obtain so many hours of training through a distributor that provides this training so that they know how to properly apply these individual lashes. This is not your lashes that you can go to a CVS that are strips that can be put on the eye. This is a very meticulous procedure that takes time and should require proper training, not only for the application purpose, but also for the safety and the infection control that comes behind that. As far as hair designing goes, the same thing happens. We need to ensure that our professionals understand the safety measures that have to be taken to properly clean and disinfect their tools after every single guest that they service. Perfect example, as much as we hate to talk about it, if we revert back to COVID, our industry was held to very high standards post-COVID as far as reopening practices go. Everything from masks to shields in some of our scopes of practice when it comes to facials or even basic designing. In shampoo areas, we had to separate with coverings to make sure that we were not cross-contaminating. So if we were held up to such a high standard to prevent infection control during that time, why is those same standards not being upheld in this particular case or not being considered? We have to make sure that we are protecting the safety of the public. And I feel that if this bill should pass, we run a very great risk of cross-contamination, spreading contagious diseases, conditions, and disorders that could easily be transmissible. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Questions from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Danielle. Yes.
Jessica Poitras.
I wish I always got that sort of applause when I came up.
Those are all the students, sorry, I know my time is up, but those are all the students on behalf of Empire Beauty School that are out in your hallway. There's an excess of 50 students out there who also support everything that I said. Sorry.
Proceed.
Dear Chair Reagan and members of the Executive Departments and Administration Committee, Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 1171, which would create more jobs and opportunities for aspiring beauty entrepreneurs. My name is Jessica Patois, and I am Legislative Counsel with the Institute for Justice. The Institute for Justice is a national, nonprofit, public interest law firm that advocates for individuals' rights. For nearly 30 years, we have helped reform beauty industry laws in over 24 states through litigation and legislative efforts. We recently also published the first of its kind report, Beauty School Debt and Dropouts, How Cosmetology Licensing Fails Beauty Workers, which details how state-mandated cosmetology programs are roadblocks rather than stepping stones. New Hampshire's beauty industry is ripe with opportunity, but current licensing laws shut people out of jobs. New Hampshire requires beauty service professionals to have one of the big 3 licenses, which you all are familiar with: the cosmetology and barber license, the manicurist license, or the esthetician's license. Grouping all beauty services into one of these 3 overbroad licenses does not work for an industry that is based on creativity and involving techniques. Outdated licensing requirements also force beauty professionals into time-consuming and costly traditional cosmetology programs, even when those programs do not teach services that aspiring beauty professionals want to offer. Traditional cosmetology licensing laws prevent niche beauty service professionals from entering into the industry. Niche beauty services include blow-dry styling, eyelash extension application, makeup application, and threading. These services are different from the big 3 because they do not use dangerous tools, chemicals, or dyes. They are very limited in their scope of practice, and niche beauty professionals typically train outside of cosmetology programs through methods like private certification or cultural exchange. Most traditional cosmetology programs do not teach niche beauty services, and if they do, it's at a very rudimentary level, which requires beauty professionals to seek further education or training, whether it be in a salon or through another private certification. Even so, aspiring niche beauty professionals must complete traditional cosmetology programs as a requirement for licensure to legally provide their services. The average cosmetology student in New Hampshire takes out about $7,300 worth of federal student loan debt to complete their first program, and most students do not graduate on time. In 2016 through the 2017 year, only about 19% of cosmetology students graduated on time. Their peers were forced to incur even more debt to finish their training. The result being that niche beauty service professionals work in underground economies where they face exploitation, or they continue to incur insurmountable debt that also raises costs for consumers without giving them any more benefit. House Bill 1171 is a solution for aspiring beauty professionals based on proven methods of reform that have created jobs and opportunities. I encourage this committee to support House Bill 1171 for 3 reasons. First, niche beauty services are safe. These niche beauty services pose virtually no risk to consumers, and we know that by FOIA requests across the country. Nationwide, there have been very few complaints filed with state boards of cosmetology about health and safety issues related to niche services. When complaints are made, they are typically about whether the service provider is licensed and not health and sanitation concerns. Second, most states already exempt niche beauty services from licensure requirements. 32 states exempt natural hair braiding, which is a form of natural hairstyling, and New Hampshire is one of those states. Over a dozen states explicitly exempt shampooing from licensing requirements. 5 states exempt blow-drying services from licensure requirements, and even more states are creating carve-outs for different sorts of hairstyling services. 10 states fully exempt makeup artists from cosmetology or esthetician license requirements. Most states also exempt makeup application for theater, television, movie, radio, or modeling purposes, so entertainment purposes, or makeup counter demonstration purposes. New Hampshire is 1 out of 10 states that does not have that carve-out. 7 states exempt eyelash extension professionals from licensing requirements. And finally, there are 15 states that exempt threaders from cosmetology and aesthetics licensing requirements. And that number continues to grow even through this legislative session across the country. In several states, threading also falls into a regulatory gray area, which means that other states do not regulate threaders because it's unclear and the rules are not enforced. States across the country are adapting their laws to reflect the growth and changes of the beauty industry to ensure that aspiring professionals have every opportunity. Third, House Bill 1171 is a jobs bill. Last year, nearly half of American companies reported labor shortages. It is time to take common sense and proven measures to reduce known barriers to entry. Reducing licensing barriers for aspiring beauty professionals does just that. For example, after Minnesota passed its freelance hair and makeup licensing reform, over 1,000 bridal hair and makeup artists were free to legitimately work without fear of enforcement. Additionally, House Bill 1171 mostly benefits lower to middle income women who do not have the time, money, or additional resources to attend a traditional cosmetology program, but do have the training to provide these in-demand services. Finally, this bill allows citizens across the state to benefit from the wealth of new talent and beauty techniques that are currently difficult to find. In conclusion, I encourage this committee to support House Bill 1171 so that aspiring beauty workers have every opportunity to thrive in New Hampshire. Thank you all for the opportunity to testify before you all today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your testimony. So I want to be clear on something. We have an individual, they only want to do eyelash extensions. They do not want to do hair. They don't want to do anything else. But they still have to go get trained. They still have to be qualified to go near someone's eyes.
Yes.
So what would be the cost to actually have the proper license to do so? So that a person that is going to have this done can feel comfortable that they're in good hands. In addition to this question, if this bill were to pass, I would want to see that it has to be a notice placed so people know that this person got licensed, and this person didn't, because that would go a long way in where I would go.
So thank you for that question, Senator. So to address the eyelash extension application services, first and foremost, so when we say an exemption from niche beauty services, we're saying that there's an exemption from a licensure requirement. And I always like to say that unlicensed does not mean untrained. An individual is not going to start a service. They're not going to provide a service. They're not going to start a business where they have not been trained, where they do not have the adequate skills to provide a service that benefits their potential consumers. So I always like to bring up the example of I think of myself as a pretty good cook. I would love to, own a restaurant that does mac and cheese one day. But currently at this time, I do not have the skills to be able to open that sort of business. I don't have the wherewithal to know how, time, temperature, control, and safety to make sure the mac and cheese is in, a certain way, or I don't know how to market those materials. And honestly, I don't know how to cook large enough batches to be able to feed a large constituency or customer base. And the same rule applies to individuals in the beauty field, especially when beauty services are so personal, right? Like, we all care very much about our beauty professionals and our service providers, and we all take that time to fully evaluate them and to know what their services are and what they're capable of. So these individuals are trained. They do have the skills. They know what they're doing. And eyelash extension service providers in particular have to get a private certification. And like Representative Power mentioned, that private certification allows them to buy the high quality level materials that are then used to do the high quality level of eyelash extensions. Occasionally I get the question, well, you could just go on Amazon and buy eyelash extension, materials. Well, you could, but that's also kind of like going to the grocery store and buying box dye. No one's paying for that service. It's not the same level of quality. It's not the same service. So these individuals are adequately trained, whether it is through cultural exchange or in the case of eyelash extensions through private certification through national accredited bodies. This bill would just allow them to just get that certification, which takes a weekend, maybe a week, rather than having to do that and then take on additional debt in an aesthetics program where they're not required to learn those skills. And then I apologize, your second question?
Well, I just wondered, what is the cost to have this license to do the eyelash extension? So I'm trying to figure out why it's so prohibitive.
Oh, so it's prohibitive because they have to get the private certification, which we're totally fine with. Once again, we want people to be educated, we want them to be trained, but those programs, that national accreditation, those private certificates cost a couple $100s, and that's an investment that people have to undergo in order to provide these services. But to then require them to get a full aesthetics license and take on tens of thousands of dollars of debt to be able to do so, even when they already have the skills to be able to do so when they get their private certification, that's what this bill is trying to fix.
So you're saying it's $200, which you should be able to do if you want to learn to do this properly, but you're saying they, in addition to, even though they only want to do eyelash extensions, would have to get a full cosmetology.
Or aesthetics license, yes, ma'am. That's under the current program, the current system. This bill would make it so that they just have to do the private certification,
I'm
and
just
then they
trying to
would
be
able
clear,
work.
so
Yes, ma'am.
okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Drew Klein?
Morning. Drew Klein from the Josiah. Down. All right, there we go. Drew Klein, Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy. We're here to testify that the effects of this bill would be positive for the state of New Hampshire. And I'm going to try to just give an overview here to help you understand a little bit the way we look at this bill. So New Hampshire cosmetology license right now requires a minimum of 1,500 hours of training in a state-approved cosmetology school or 3,000 hours of training for at least 18 months under a licensed cosmetologist. We heard testimony in the House committee on this bill that cosmetology school costs about $20,000. So we have a trend of very popular trend in the last few years of what are called blow-dry bars, which are these niche beauty services opening up around the country. But in New Hampshire, you have to get a full license to open up one of those shops. Those requirements that we have now, that 1,500 hours, is very excessive. Massachusetts requires only 1,000 hours to get your cosmetology license. So we require 50% more than Massachusetts does already. This bill would make it legal to offer these blow-dry styling services that includes shampooing, conditioning, drying, arranging, curling, straightening, or styling hair. Not dangerous stuff. Makeup application, eyebrow threading, and eyelash extension without going to school, paying $20,000 to get the full cosmetology license. These are safe and common practices that people do for themselves, their families, and their friends regularly. Not one of these services requires 1,500 hours of training. That's the issue. That's what we're talking about. Making sure that people who are maybe low income, who are trying to get a start in life, can set up a shop, maybe even do some of this stuff out of their own home where that's legal, without going to school and spending $20,000 for and spending 1,500 hours to get a license. Not one of these services requires 1,500 hours of training to do safely. But right now, we make them do that. The other component of this bill that I think hasn't been talked about very much here is that it exempts makeup application and similar cosmetic beauty services from licensure when offered for demonstration, that's at a department store makeup counter, for example, or for theatrical, photographic, television, and media appearances. This is a pretty important change that I think has been overlooked. New Hampshire is only one of only 10 states without such exemptions. Every bordering state offers a similar exemption. Vermont exempts makeup application for theatrical and performing arts industries. Maine exempts makeup application for theater, movies, television, modeling, and retail demonstration. Even Massachusetts exempts from cosmetology licensure anyone doing demonstrations of cosmetology products. It requires a separate demonstrator registration, but not the 1,000 hours of licensure. And just to demonstrate the absurdity of not having a carve-out for that, Bernie Sanders, who lives next door to Vermont, ran for president. He would not need a licensed cosmetologist to apply makeup if he were to perform in a theater performance in Burlington, Vermont. He would need a licensed cosmetologist to apply makeup for a 2-minute TV hit at St. Anselm College. That's kind of how out of whack New Hampshire's requirements are. It'd be pretty silly to claim that Bernie's health and safety are put at risk by not having a licensed cosmetologist to apply his makeup for a 2-minute TV hit. But that's what we do in New Hampshire. So that's my testimony.
Questions? Thank you.
All right. Sorry, just to address Senator Ricciardi's question. We heard testimony that the schools do not require eyebrow threading as a component of their training. That's not required to get your 1,500 hours cosmetology license. They add it as an add-on, as something you could do for certification. So taking it out and having it done this way, you can still get that certification. You just don't have to go to the 1,500 hours of training for non-eyebrow threading stuff. That's the point.
Thank you. Ross Connolly, can you do your testimony in 2 minutes or less?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ross Connolly. I'm the Deputy State Director for Americans for Prosperity in New Hampshire, here to voice our support for HB 1171. I'll be brief since I don't want to be repetitive. As we've heard, that this exemption applies to things that you don't necessarily even get the training for in the required school to get the license. So requiring someone to attend a school to get a license for a procedure that when that procedure is not taught in that school seems very pointless, superfluous, and as we've heard, you can then go get private certification for these services, and this will bring this new industry that's very attractive to folks my age, millennials, Gen Z, these blow bars where people can go and just get these very targeted services that pose very little threat or risk to the consumer. There's market forces. To some earlier questions, if an individual has no training and opens up, say, a makeup store where they're applying makeup, and they're not providing a service that is of high quality, that's not going to be a business that lasts very long. And that's a very good check on some of these things. So for these reasons, we think that this poses very little threat to the public and would be a big economic boost and growth in this sector of the economy. So with that, we encourage the committee to move this bill to pass. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've gone to excessive lengths to get the names of all the persons in the lobby who were here to oppose. I'm assuming they're all here to oppose. And so we're going to conclude this hearing on this bill as we're a half an hour past.
Excuse me, Senator Reagan, there's another individual that's here to testify and she signed up.
Yes, there's other people who've signed up who are not going to be testifying. And that concludes the hearing on 1171, House Bill 1256. And then they've got pages coming in from the lobby. So. Representative Allard, proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Hopefully, the hearing on House Bill 1256 will move with a little bit more alacrity than the previous bill because we don't have the great number of people assembled that the previous bill did. For the record, I am Representative J.C. Allard, representing the 21st District of Merrimack County, which the Suncook Valley towns of Pittsfield and Epsom. And I am also the prime sponsor of House Bill 1256, which is a bipartisan bill receiving unanimous bipartisan support in its committee in the House and passed the full House on the consent calendar. The genesis of this bill is a request from the Department of Military Affairs, recognizing that recent changes in the responsibilities of the department and the increasing complexity of the mission especially with regards to the Veterans Cemetery at Bosquen. The need has come to our attention that current fixed working schedules and schedules of compensation do not meet the needs of 21st century more flexible requirements for work outside of the normal working week. And so the department has asked that we proceed with this bill and has lined up far more expert testimony than I can give you. But subject to your questions, that would conclude my introduction.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Warren Perry?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Warren Perry. I'm the Deputy Adjutant General for New Hampshire's Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services. The department requested this bill. Representative Allard was nice enough to sponsor it for us. And really, I provided written testimony via email. I provided copies here for the committee. I'm not going to read it. I just would like to highlight a couple of things. In 2019, RSA 110B made some changes to the organization of what was then the Adjutant General's Department and turned it into the Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services. And as a result of those changes, the department now has 3 divisions that are separate from the National Guard that are charged with taking care of veterans. The Division of Veteran Services, which was previously a standalone division, the Division of Community-Based Military Programs that was within Health and Human Services, and the New Hampshire State Veteran Cemetery, which was previously in the Adjutant General's Department. In the past, all 3 of those divisions are in statute. They exist in statute. And in the past 4 years, the responsibilities and duties of 2 of those divisions have evolved significantly, specifically those at the cemetery and the community-based military programs. Subsequent to that reorganization, there was a bill passed that was titled the Veterans Bill of Rights, which changed the responsibilities significantly of the Division of Community-Based Military Programs. And now it includes administering things like administering military skills test waiver programs, acceptance of military training and experience in professional licensing, and establishing programs to end veteran homelessness. Additionally, the scope of the Veterans Cemetery has evolved also over the years. So the cemetery will be 25 years old this September. In the past 7 or 8 years, the number of people that have been interred at the cemetery has doubled. And the cemetery director is charged with coordinating directly with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, or Veterans Administration, specifically the National Cemetery Administration, for expansion and ensuring that all of the souls are appropriately cared for at the cemetery. We've expanded the cemetery 3 times in the last 8 years, and then the next expansion is scheduled for next year. So what we would think of just a caretaker of a cemetery has really kind of evolved a little bit. So currently, those 3 divisions that I mentioned that exist in the department, 2 of them are led by classified employees. One's a labor grade 25, the other a labor grade 27. It's kind of a crime in our minds that labor grade 1 and 2, that they have to punch a time clock. A lot of their duties specifically require them to work off schedule, and it's really a burden in the state's administrative personnel system to be able to make that work. Accounting for comp time, accounting for overtime. So it's just moving them to the classified system. Moving them to the classified system just will make their managerial duties more aligned with what they have to do and easier to manage. So, being in the classified system really is an impediment to their mission accomplishment. So we would like to see these positions moved to the classified system. And it'll create parity in the department, and it'll also, enable us to more efficiently accomplish our missions to take care of veterans in the state. Subject to your questions, that ends my testimony.
Questions? Thank you. That's Representative Fellows, did you wish to testify? Yes, sir. Because you didn't note that.
Thank you. Is this on?
Push the button. There you go.
I'm State Representative Sally Fellows from Holderness. I'm on the ED&A committee in the House, and I worked on the amendment, which is the result, which resulted in what you're looking at right now. I'm a veteran, and I'm also a retired state employee. So just a couple of things I would like to add is that I totally agree with Mr. Perry that the two positions are, the labor grades for those two positions are far below what they should be. So I think adding to the statute the duties of the cemetery supervisor and reclassifying them to be unclassified employees will help to align the duties of the pay for those positions with the duties of those positions. So I completely support the bill, and as a veteran, I probably wouldn't be here today if it hadn't been for the fact that not particularly this organization, but some people who help vets find jobs found me the job at the Department of Education over 35 years ago, which eventually led to me being here right now. So I think that's a very important service. So that's really all I have to say. And I'm going to drop off testimony for the last bill that you heard. Thank you.
We have that. Questions? Thanks, Ellen. And that will conclude the testimony on House Bill 1256.
Thank you all very much. Have a great day.
House Bill 1560. Representative Powers back.
Thank you.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable committee members. As the prime sponsor, I appreciate the opportunity to introduce to you today House Bill 1560. For the record, I am Representative Diane Power. I represent the towns of Brookline and Mason in Hillsborough County, District 26. House Bill 1560 modifies the requirements for non-resident licensure by the Board of Barbering, Cosmetology, and Aesthetics. The issue that this bill addresses is that under current New Hampshire law, barbers, cosmetologists, and estheticians coming from out of state who have completed their education in another state, obtained the required training hours, passed the professional licensing exam, met all of the standards and requirements of a state licensing body, hold a current valid license, and clearly have the necessary credentials to provide services to clients, they are prohibited from working in New Hampshire unless they first successfully navigate onerous requirements in order that the state of New Hampshire recognize their current valid out-of-state professional license. Clearly, such barriers are unnecessary and burdensome. It hinders these licensed professionals to be able to legally work in our state, and it hurts our economy. The solution that this bill provides is simple. First, It amends current law to recognize current valid out-of-state barbering, cosmetology, and aesthetic licenses. And second, it repeals the vague, quote, substantially equivalent, unquote, language in current statute as it pertains to the licensing requirements of other states, noting that New Hampshire requires 1,500 educational hours for cosmetology licensure, and that 92% of other states, that is 40 states plus the District of Columbia, require the same or more educational hours as New Hampshire. This simple statutory change streamlines the current process, and it enables out-of-state licensed beauty professionals to become licensed in New Hampshire without the unnecessary red tape. In conclusion, this bill applies only to licensed beauty professionals holding a current valid out-of-state license. This bill requires the Board of Barbering, Cosmetology, and Aesthetics to recognize these out-of-state licenses without additional requirements. This bill enables already licensed beauty professionals to be able to work in New Hampshire without delay, contributing to our economy. And lastly, this bill benefits workers, employers, and consumers by creating greater access to skilled labor and beauty services in the Granite State. That concludes my bill introduction. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions if you will permit.
Questions from the committee? So,
Thank you very much, Senator Reagan, and thank you, Representative, again, for coming before us this morning. So, so this is essentially like a reciprocity type of bill for licensure, okay? So if there is say a service that, that is covered under New Hampshire licensure that is not covered under, say, Massachusetts or another state that you want to have, them to be automatically recognized for, what's the pathway to make sure that there's a competency or check off for that? And I want to bring this up because you brought up emergency medical service licensure earlier. And what I know about that is that if you come from one state to New Hampshire, when you apply for a license, there are a few more skills that we allow different levels of EMS licensure to provide, but they have to have, I don't know what they call it now, but it was like a transition. They have to take like an online transition quick program and make sure they do a protocol exam to show that they understand those differences between this state and that state. So what I'm looking to do is try to line up, if you're coming from out of state and we expect this state, and for cosmetology licensure, that there's a certain skill that we provide that this person, when they come in and they're now got that license, which means they can do that, how are we going to make sure at the state level that that's covered? Does that make sense?
Thank you for the question, Senator.
No, I kind of mixed it in with EMS, but I was drawing on your comparison earlier.
Right. So there is a core, set of skills, and the point being is that if an individual is licensed in another state to provide such services, then regardless of the state borders, that they have been licensed by a state licensing board. So therefore, the state of New Hampshire should be able to recognize their ability to provide services to customers.
Senator Reagan, just a quick follow-up. I'm not disputing that with you. I just want to make sure that if there is something else that New Hampshire does in addition to what they already what's already required, and that person's going to come and get recognition that it's apples to apples, and in order to make that apple whole, there has to be some mechanism in place to assure that they are competent in that once they get a licensure in New Hampshire. So they're not all different states, unless they're in an interstate compact, don't do it all equally when it comes to licensure. So I don't disagree with your basic premise. I'm just trying to make sure that we address, if there's any differences, how they meet that when they come into the state and say, I've got this license, that they are as whole as the person next to them who's been previously licensed in the state.
Thank you for that follow-up. Could you give an example of what you might be referring to?
And we have so I don't know enough about the services themselves, like what, this might be an offline conversation that you and I have and try to work out, but what I'm suggesting is, so I'm gonna take you back to emergency medical services. There's, say, a certain type of medication, or not even a medication, a certain type of airway device that an EMT can use in New Hampshire that they can't use in Massachusetts. And when they come here and they get that, before we give them a license, because they're gonna be required to do that, we just make sure that they know how. So I'm trying to draw that line with cosmetology services. And I'm happy to talk with you offline and see if there's a way we can sort this out so it's comparable, because I don't disagree with your basic premise. Okay?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I would appreciate that. And to be honest, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that would be pertain to cosmetology, barbering, and aesthetics that you're surmising that would follow along with your example with regard to an EMT, because cosmetology, barbering, and aesthetics, it's, you know, there's a subset of, there's a set of skills, and it's universal. I honestly, I'd be happy to talk offline to maybe identify something that is in fact maybe a concern. But at this point, I can't.
And we'll let it roll, but I just want to make sure that it's apples to apples, okay?
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to talk to you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Reagan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica Wojcik.
Good morning again, Chair Reagan and members of the Executive Departments and Administration Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 1560, which would allow the New Hampshire Board of Barbering, Cosmetology, and Aesthetics to recognize out-of-state beauty industry professional licenses. My name is Jessica Patois, and I am Legislative Counsel for the Institute for Justice. Again, we recently published the first of its kind survey, Beauty School Debt and Dropouts, How Cosmetology Licensing Fails Aspiring Beauty Workers, which details how state-mandated cosmetology programs are roadblocks rather than stepping stones. So all 50 states require cosmetologists, barbers, and estheticians to be licensed. Each state's beauty school curriculum is nearly identical. Beauty practitioner skills and techniques and beauty services are also nearly identical. Despite those similarities, it is difficult to have an out-of-state beauty license recognized in New Hampshire. New Hampshire requires out-of-state beauty license requirements to be substantially equivalent to or higher than those of New Hampshire's license. That arbitrary recognition requirement restricts the mobility of licenses, which is a problem for beauty professionals and employers across the state. I encourage this committee to support House Bill 1560 because reducing licensing barriers creates more opportunities for the citizens of New Hampshire. First, license mobility is exceedingly important. Employers across the country are experiencing labor shortages. Making it easier for licensed beauty professionals to work by reducing barriers will allow employers to have a wider pool of potential applicants. Second, the substantially equivalent or higher than language is vague. It creates a chilling effect for potential beauty professionals who may have an interest in working in New Hampshire. Qualified beauty professionals may choose to not bring their skills to the state for fear of having to undergo additional costly and time-consuming training. Third, this bill helps to empower women. Most beauty service professionals are women, and beauty service skills are easily transferable, making this industry an attractive choice for women who want to continue to support their families while moving from state to state. However, the time it takes to determine the quality of a beauty license for these professionals means that these women are out of work because of needless bureaucracy, which leaves their careers to stagnate. This bill helps to get these women into work sooner so that they may support their families and continue to advance their careers. House Bill 1560 makes a small change to the law that will have large impacts on beauty professionals across the state who want to bring their skills, knowledge, and experience to benefit New Hampshire's beauty industry. In conclusion, I encourage you all to support House Bill 1560 so that skilled beauty professionals may bring their talents to New Hampshire. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Questions? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I'm just kind of curious, how many times have people been denied from other states for coming in? Any idea, or is it overwhelming, or is it something that's just a
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't have that number in front of me. But what I do know is, recognition bills like this are highly championed by military families and whatnot because they have the skill set and they want to be able to move from state to state to state, and they have to do so, rather quickly, in year increments. So whether it's 2 years or 3 years, but so I imagine that it can be. That there would be a number of individuals who just wouldn't be able to get the license in the time that it would take for them to be able to start here and start their business.
Thank you for coming before us again. I just wanted to mention, I had said, talked to Representative earlier, talked about interstate compacts. So although there is not one yet for barbering and cosmetology, in 2021, the Council for State Governments did a kickoff meeting, and they did this in cooperation with the Department of Defense because what they want to do is allow mobility for those that are becoming, leaving active service or their spouses to become, to have mobility and more gainfully employed. So that is another, as we're having this conversation, I would also suggest that your organization talk with the Council for State Governments and see what we can do about getting this compact up and running. The last meeting was in June of 2021. Okay.
Yeah. So, if I may address your comment, so we are supportive of compacts occasionally, but the difference between reciprocity and recognition is that recognition is kind of just a green light that a state may take on its own accord, whereas reciprocity, takes a bit of away of states' autonomy in order to determine who they want their workers to be. And so, while a cosmetology license compact could come into existence, or they could include language, reciprocity language inside of a larger compact. A recognition bill like this one is just a simpler, more streamlined, faster version of that, and it allows the state of New Hampshire to quickly allow those individuals to start working rather than having to meet the requirements of multiple states put together.
Okay. We talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so in the history of the Executive Departments and Administration Committee, we have a strong history of supporting the dilemma for military families transferring into the state and not having their licenses or skills recognized by the state of New Hampshire. So we've done well. And apparently we can do more. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Ross, same request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Once again, my name is Ross Connolly. I'm the Deputy State Director for Americans for Prosperity. Just here to voice our support for HB 1560. New Hampshire, it's no secret, is in the top 10 states for unemployment in the nation. All of those top 10 states are very close in the amount of workers that are available. And if you speak to any business owner right now in the state, one of the most difficult problems they're dealing with growth projections of their business is finding qualified employees. So salons, barbershops, cosmetology services are no exception. Both big chain stores, by the way, like Great Clips, as well as locally owned businesses are finding this struggle specifically within this industry. And the licensure requirements across the New England states, which would be where most of the workers would be coming from, are generally uniform. So, for instance, both Massachusetts and Maine require 1,000 hours to acquire a license. Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire, we require 1,500 hours. But all New England states are within the 1,000-hour nationally recommended standard. So all the New England states have nationally recognized standards for their requirements. These slight differences between our requirements do not pose any additional risk to public safety. There's no real difference in risk to the consumer. In Massachusetts, that only requires 1,000 hours. To New Hampshire, that only requires 1,500 hours. So the decision to recognize these licenses is quite straightforward. These folks provide a critical service. It's one of those services that nearly every consumer actually uses. And we think we should be cutting some of the unnecessary red tape that's standing in the way of folks that are wanting to come to New Hampshire, contribute to our communities, and provide this service, and they're all qualified already and have been practicing already. So for those reasons, we encourage the committee to move this bill to pass.
Questions? Thank you. That
Thank you.
concludes the hearing on House Bill 1560, and we'll proceed to House Bill 1192.
Representative McGuire's had to leave, so she's asked me to introduce it on her behalf.
Okay.
That's all right. Good morning, Senate ED&A Committee. For the record, my name is Representative Steve Pearson from Rockingham District 6 in Derry, and I am here to introduce House Bill 1192 to the committee. House Bill 1192 involves the Board of Acupuncture. This bill passed in 2020 and died a COVID death, as a lot of bills did in 2020. Simply, the bill clarifies who can call themselves a doctor. It modifies the Board of Acupuncture in the way that the board is made up. It places the licensure application fee to be set by the executive director of OPLC instead of being a fixed number, which has become a fairly standard practice. It creates an apprenticeship path to licensure, and this bill did pass the House with a voice vote to bring it over to you. That concludes my introduction.
Questions? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jody Bell.
Good morning. My name is Jody Bell. I'm a licensed acupuncturist here in the state of New Hampshire. I'm here in favor of this bill, HB 1192. As Representative Pearson said, this has already been in the House Bill of 282. It was initiated by the Acupuncture Board Licensing Board of Licensing. And we just wanted to facilitate the process here and confirm that we agree with everything there. There is one minor change. The board chairman, Cindy Tirogetti, she sent an email on the 28th of March and regarding some of the details of this specific wording. And the only thing we'd like to add is the addition, or the changes rather, to change the word Oriental to the word Asian. And that is occurring in 9 instances in RSA 328G. So it's finding that the word Oriental is not well received in a cultural situation anymore. So I don't know if there are any questions the board has.
Questions?
So we just ask that it pass with the wording that has been suggested and is also reflected in the 32 with the change of Oriental to the word Asian.
Okay. Thank you. Molly Gendro.
Good morning. My name is Molly Gendro of Stratford, New Hampshire. I am here to support HB 1192 as a licensed acupuncturist and a board member of the New Hampshire Acupuncture and Asian Medicine Association. Our association represents the interests of acupuncturists across the state, and I'm here on behalf of our membership. We held a meeting in January to gauge member support for 1192, and we are unanimous in support of our fellow colleagues who go beyond the typical master's degree to get their doctorate. Most acupuncturists in the state hold a master's degree from a 4-year graduate program. So we agree those who go beyond the typical 4 years to get their doctorate should take on the title of doctor. We also support the changes to the licensing board, which may help other or fellow colleagues from other countries gain licensing here in New Hampshire. And we had a discussion about the supervision of acupuncture detox specialists and shared our recommended changes to the first draft of this bill back in January. And as it is stated in the amended bill you have before you, we agree that acupuncturists should be supporting acupuncture detox specialists with supervision. This bill will allow supervision to be more flexible, allowing for in-person or virtual check-ins. I have polled our membership back in January and was surprised that there's no one, those who responded, no one had been asked to supervise before. And there's a number of volunteers ready to do so. And I have a list of those volunteers. The New Hampshire Acupuncture and Asian Medicine Association members are in full support of this bill as it is presented to you today, and urge you to vote yes to pass HB 1192. And I'd like to take a moment just to mention that our association is a wealth of knowledge for acupuncture, Chinese, and Asian medicine. Our membership spans those who crusaded the first licensing of acupuncture here in New Hampshire and non-voting student members. So please reach out to us if you have any questions about acupuncture, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have today. Thank you.
Do you imagine there to be any objection to substituting Eastern for Asian or Oriental?
I don't think there'd be an objection. Excuse me, would you mind turning your mic on? Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I'm a quiet speaker too. Sorry. No, I don't think there'd be any objection of Eastern medicine over Asian or Oriental.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes testimony on House Bill 1192. We'll proceed to House Bill 1102. What do I put that zero in? And who are you that was not called?
He just told me to come down.
Representative McGuire is also, like I said, stepped out for a House meeting, so she will not be able to introduce.
And so who are you?
I'm Representative Vanessa Sheehan.
Oh, okay. You're even signed up. Have a seat and introduce the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the Senate. My name is Representative Vanessa Sheehan. I represent the town of Milford, Hillsborough 23. HB 1102 came to legislative administration this year as a simple housekeeping bill. It was just a cleanup from a legislative budget audit. The Department of State's most recent financial audit report states that the Boxing and Wrestling Commission and the Joint Board of Licensure and Certification are not functioning within the Department of State as a separate organizational entity, as cited in the statute. The amended bill removes both the commission and the board from RSA 5.13, as well as removing the language of the attachment in the Boxing and Wrestling Commission statute, RSA 285.1. attachment was shown in statute for the licensure board to repeal. The amendment was additionally needed to remove repeals of 3 unrelated committees and commissions that the prime sponsor indicated were included on the original bill in error.
Questions? Thank you. That was fast. We have no one else here who signed up to speak. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 1102. And, excuse me, 1192. And we'll open the hearing on House Bill 1102. No? Oh, never mind. House Bill 1269. Yeah, this is going faster than I thought. Okay. And are you back again?
Thank you again, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the Senate. Again, I'm Vanessa Sheehan, Representative Sheehan, and I represent the town of Milford, Hillsborough 23. HB 1269 came to our committee for the second time this year, and our committee vote was unanimous and bipartisan in passing this bill. The Senate saw this bill last year, so it may look familiar to you since it was largely unchanged. Representative Eagle, who's the prime sponsor of this bill, is here, so I'm sure she'll be speaking to the amendment changes into the bill. But one amendment I would like to speak to that when you saw this bill last year, a section of the bill was taken out, and it was in regards to the section on the reef fisheries. And we felt as a community it was important to put that back into the bill, stating that the majority of the committee members live in tidewater towns. They originally said that all members should live in tidewater towns, but because there may be someone that's knowledgeable in that area and may not be able to live in the seacoast area, we felt it was important to change the wording to just having the majority of the members live on the seacoast area. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Karen Ebel.
I apologize to the committee. I seem to have left my testimony somewhere, so I was trying to find it. So it happens. I was trying to have everything copied for you, and I must have put it down somewhere. So, for the record, my name is Karen Ebel.
We have your testimony.
Okay, you have the testimony. Okay. So as you know, so let me just start over. My name is Karen Ebel, and I represent Merrimack District 5, which is New London and Newbury. And I'm here to discuss House Bill 1269, which passed on the consent calendar out of the House in the last a few weeks ago. So unfortunately, while I was running for the testimony, I didn't hear what the representative said about it all, but basically what this bill is, it's a compilation of the second half of the work that the Committee on Committees did, and I chaired that committee, and it was a result of a decision by the Speaker. I was Deputy Speaker at the time, that we needed to really review the over 100 or more existing statutory committees and commissions, which required upwards of 300 appointments. It was huge. And the project had been done about 10 years prior by Neil Kirk and Lori Harding, who were in the House at that point.
So we had, since 2019, we had met with all the agencies and went through all the statutory commissions that they were administratively associated with, and we made recommendations in a series of 2 bills. This is the second bill. HB 186 last year failed due to a disagreement during the committee of conference process. So what I started with when I introduced the bill as the base bill, I introduced the bill as it was passed by the Senate. And so there really aren't changes to the part that you folks passed last time, except for a couple of tweaks with respect to the Discovery Center, which were requested by the Discovery Center. The thing we did do in the introduction of this bill is the Speaker was really interested in including in the bill several of the recommendations that actually had been made by our Committee on Committees so that they would appear in statute. And those changes start on page 9. The first thing that we did, and this was working with House Counsel James Cianci. If you look on line 5 on page 9, we defined study committee, and we actually on line 20 we defined commission, because it never was really clear what the differences were between the legislative study committee and a statutory commission. So I just, as part of housekeeping for us legislators, we thought that was really important. In an attempt to try to wrangle these things a little bit and to make sure that they don't end up lasting longer than they're really needed to last, there's a section in here that says that any newly formed commissions shall have an automatic 5-year repeal date. And that way, you know, you can guarantee that if there's something that's really useful, they can come back and request that their legislative authorization be extended. The other thing is, you know, some of these commissions can have upwards of 30 or 40 people. We put in here that no more than 15 members per statutory commission. One thing that the committee put in was the legislative administration committee. They said that the legislators of the commission shall constitute a majority of the commission. And I think the rationale there was to sort of keep the jurisdiction of the legislators in the majority, because they ultimately would be the ones that would be making decisions that related to legislation. So that's there. The other thing is really like reporting requirements. The Committee on Committees was really interested in making sure that the reports that are being generated by the study committees and the statutory commissions are going to the committees that have jurisdiction over the subject matter, rather than just going like to the President of the Senate and to the Speaker of the House and to the clerk. I mean, we want to make the information generated as useful as possible. And we also wanted to make sure that everything goes up on the website. And then the last thing on page 10, we wanted to ensure that the several-month process that we had to, or that House Committee Services had to engage in to even compile all the commissions and what their responsibilities were, would be done on an ongoing basis. So what we put in here at the top of page 10 was that the committee services folks would constantly be updating the compendium and providing them to standing committee chairs by the beginning of each year. So that's that part. Now the other part that I heard Representative Sheehan discussing was the issue on the advisory committees on marine fisheries, advisory committee on marine fisheries. That's on line 5. So I just want to give you a little bit of history on this. As the representative said, the requirement that a majority of the committee be from the Seacoast region was something that came from the committees, and it was thought that if you only allowed members to come from the Seacoast region, you might not be able to have somebody from outside the region who you really wanted on the advisory committee, but didn't happen to live there. So when you folks passed it in the Senate, that majority requirement was in HB 186 and you removed it. So as I say, I didn't include it when I originally introduced the bill, but the House committee wanted to put it back in. Since I had some history with this and I had the benefit of Fish and Game's testimony the last time in opposition, and I knew what some of their concerns were, I recrafted the majority provision to include, first of all, that all the members who were appointed would have expertise in marine fisheries. And that never had been in there. The other thing that was glaring to me was that the Seacoast region term in the original statute was not defined. And in their testimony, Fish and Game had referred to the Tidewater Towns section, and so I included it in this provision so that now actually Tidewater Towns is defined. So that's there. They also were concerned that the Tidewater Town residency requirement didn't apply to the alternate member. I tried to write this so that it would, and so that's sort of where it is. That does mean that there may be occasions where a quorum of the committee, if it's 3 people, 2 of them might not be from the Tidewater Towns, and I understand that might be of concern to Fish and Game. But that's sort of where it was. And I guess the only other part of the story I want to tell is that in doing all of this, Fish and Game hadn't been alerted, as I now understand it, and I was concerned about that, and I wrote to them yesterday because I wanted to be sure they knew what was happening, and so they've only had the benefit of this knowledge for 24 hours.
You have an amendment, 782.
I do not.
It's under
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, that's
Yeah,
the House.
amended version.
That's the House passed version. So it includes my amendment with the language for Fish and Game. So this is the House passed version.
Okay. Questions? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you just touch base on this? On page 2, line 11 and 12, they're talking about the Youth Development Center population. I'm assuming they're talking about the Sununu Center?
Yes.
Yes. Could you just explain that then? What is that?
Well, I've had so I work very closely on this because the current speaker's office tasked Karen Umberger to work with me, and she had a similar question. You know, I'm not as familiar with this issue as a lot of people do, but this was really just a house cleaning measure to remove it. It has absolutely no substantive effect. I talked to Representative Umberger, she talked to Representative Edwards, they reviewed it all and nobody had any concern. I don't think that's responsive as a substantive thing, but truly people who are familiar with this didn't have an issue with it. And I guess the only other thing I'd say is that OLS went through the statutes that our repeal decisions were affecting, and all they did was they made sure that all the cross references were deleted. So that's why this is in here. And I, you know, it's already passed the House twice now and the Senate once, and nobody's had an issue with it.
Just to follow, I'm concerned, not that there's a problem, I don't even know yet, I just want to look at it. It's in my district, it's in my ward.
Yeah, of
It means
course.
a lot, so it's something I've got
Sure.
to really do my due diligence. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Anyone else?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I'm happy to work more on the fish and game issue if folks want to. Thank you.
Marty, do you want to, do you want to add to this?
Good morning, I'm Marty Mobley. I'm the legal coordinator at the Fish and Game Department. Just to follow up with what Representative Ebel was saying, the history of the bill. HB 186, when it was first introduced, did not contain any reference to the Advisory Committee on Marine Fisheries. That amendment was added, and that's when Fish and Game came out opposed to HB 186. Then when the bill went over to the Senate stripped out that portion amongst other things. And then it died in the Committee of Conference process. When the bill HB 1269 was introduced this year, it did not contain any reference to the Advisory Committee on Marine Fisheries, so we did not flag it as being something to monitor. But Representative Ebel did contact us yesterday afternoon to let us know this was being heard today and that the amendment had been added that includes the Advisory Committee again. Because Fish and Game Department does not set policy regarding legislation, we confer with the Fish and Game Commission, and we have not had time to confer with them since becoming aware of this. We are asking that the eDNA committee delay execing on this until we can meet with the commission on the 12th of April to advise them of the different language regarding the majority coming from the Tidewater towns and the requirement for the marine fisheries expertise, so that we can get their opinion and their advice and guidance and then be able to offer that.
When's the next meeting?
The 12th of April. So because currently though, we have to maintain the position of opposition until we can confer with the commission.
Okay.
Questions?
That was a new job.
I love it. I love it. It's a great bunch of people. Thank you.
Is that everybody that wants to weigh in on that? Okay. We'll conclude House Bill 1269 and proceed to House Bill 1182. Stephen, if you're supposed to open this.
1182 Court Board.
Thank you, members of Senate, eDNA, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the opportunity to bring forward House Bill 1182. The prime sponsor of this bill has suffered a rather catastrophic medical accident, so he cannot be here today, and I will be introducing it for just for the House to get it into process. House Bill 1182 is relative to the Board of Court Reporters. And what this bill does is it modifies the Board of Court Reporters to an advisory board. It puts that board in line with other boards in the OPLC that have had trouble functioning. There will not be any board disruption, as the executive director can now appoint the current members of the board into the transitionary time period as an advisory board. And this particular piece of legislation passed on a voice vote in the House. That is the crux of this piece of legislation.
Questions? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Lindsay Courtney, Executive Director, OPLC.
OPLC wishes to express its support for House Bill 1182 and thank the House for moving this bill forward. I think the committee has observed that we have a few of these bills that would modify some of our very small boards to advisory boards due to concerns over not being able to effectively function on a regular basis. This is one of those boards. There are only 2 board members. There are only 70 licensees. The board has licensed about 9 people in the last 5 years. And so we are concerned that as time goes on that we will not be able to effectively replace board members, and we'll get to a situation where we have a regulatory requirement, a licensure requirement, but nobody to effectively regulate. So that was the crux of this bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just see on page 2, lines 5 through 7, removing the late charge up to 20% late fee. Is that with 9 people? It just doesn't matter, or?
Well, so what we've done is RSA 310A has granted the authority to the office to promulgate rules regarding fees, which we would include late fees. Having a statutory fee is problematic because it doesn't allow us to have a more efficient, streamlined approach. If there are going to be late fees, and currently we don't have any based on some conversations we've had with the LBA and an audit, but if we are, we think that the late fees should be pretty consistent across the professions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes 1182, and we'll proceed to House Bill 1330. Yeah.
Good morning, Senate EDNA. For the record, my name is Representative Steve Pearson, Rockingham District 6 in Derry. The prime sponsor is the same prime sponsor as the past bill, and who could also not be here today to introduce this. So House Bill 1330 repeals the board in its entirety of what you would kind of refer to as kind of a catch-all type of medical board. We learned in House EDNA that New Hampshire is the only state that licenses these jobs under that type of a catch-all. We also learned that the workers cannot independently work and must be under a licensed medical provider to function. The board was created due to a specific incident at Exeter Hospital years ago and there's not been an issue since. This bill passed the House on a voice vote and now has come to you. We heard lengthy testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions, certainly in reference to what we heard over in the House, but that's the crux of this bill.
Thank you, Representative.
Sure.
Is it possible that there have not been any incidents since because there is this board in place providing oversight for this particular group of medical technicians that essentially, again, run unlicensed or were previously in hospitals throughout New Hampshire?
So one of the things that's a great question because that was asked. And the thing is that, with this particular group, if you notice in the bill, it removes a tremendous amount of different areas of RSAs because New Hampshire is the only state that has ever tried to do this, and it was a result of an incident. So they just kind of created an umbrella, if you will, and kind of dumped all these people into it, and no other state does that. It's difficult to kind of have the chicken and egg conversation in the sense of did this, what amounts to a registry, prevent a similar incident from occurring that happened at Exeter Hospital. Now, that particular incident, for those that aren't familiar, involved actual multi-states from this particular person, and was rather tragic in the way that the infections occurred and the thefts and the crimes that were committed by this one individual. The current way that this is made up in New Hampshire is it's internal. So someone coming in from another state would not be caught by this. This only really works within the internals of New Hampshire. So if you were to have a problem at Parkland, let's say, and then you went over to Exeter and then over to CMC or whatever, sure. Within that there would be, but New Hampshire's medical community is extraordinarily tiny. So having no real ability to do anything from anybody out of state, because we are the only state that does this, and it's not something that functions other places, I don't think that would have had any effect.
Okay, well, so if I'm a medical technician and I come to the state of New Hampshire, I don't have to apply to get a license through this board?
So depending on what your function is, if it's covered under the catch-all, then you would. The thing with this is that these type of jobs require that they perform under a licensed medical provider. They cannot act independently at all. So House ED&A felt that there's really no reason to license these people because they can't independently practice. They have to function under a licensed provider. And again, we're the only state that's doing this in this manner.
I'm just trying, one more. What I'm trying to get at, Representative Pearson, is if you come from another state, how do we know that you haven't been in trouble or haven't had an issue whether you're licensed or not? I mean, that was part of that problem, and this is something that, I mean, nursing has a board for nursing that has oversight in this way, and that's where they catch these, say diversion, particular,
Sure.
In this case, it was largely about diversion. Emergency Medical Services has a board, and they have a background check in a similar way to know what's happening when these people are coming in and take care of patients in our state. So
Sure.
I'm trying to get at the external part of it. Like, if you're coming from another state here, we should be able to use this as a mechanism to catch any of these red flags so that there isn't somebody who's run afoul.
Right. And it doesn't
It
it just doesn't function that way, and it never has.
Okay.
It's never been designed to the vet. I've been an EMT in New Hampshire for over 20 years, so I'm very familiar with that. The National Registry has a process of folks that have had problems in other states, and of course, when you come into New Hampshire, you have to have your in New Hampshire now, you have to have a National Registry license, so that kind of takes care of the EMT part of it. But as far as the other things, the individual hospitals and individual providers that hire these folks are still required to do their vetting process. That doesn't change. So it would be no different than someone coming in for any job from out of state. They'll need to vet a person who applies and comes in, and just through the normal hiring process. It's just that I think we've kind of had the empty fire extinguisher on the wall a little bit in reference to this because, hey, we have this registry that occurs, and I think folks haven't realized that it's really just internal to the state of New Hampshire, and it does not function to prevent someone from doing the hopping that unfortunately we've seen in some cases, especially with the drug seekers as they go from state to state, changing employment.
And they do within state too, so.
Sure. It's just a lot more.
Okay, understood. Thank you for taking my questions.
Sure. I'm expressing the House's thought with this. Representative Schmidt was the one that did file it, but that's kind of how we boiled it down, if you will.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Senator Rishardi.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my question. My concern is in the statement of intent. You are saying that these medical technicians are under the direct supervision of the hospital or the doctor, but not directly, because if they're alone with the patient in a room and they're not licensed, they're really, and with all the job shortages, I know myself when my parents were living and taking them to appointments, medical technicians were with us, and there was no one around that was supervising what was happening.
Okay, so with the various roles, some of these are simply processing things, x-ray processing, different machine operational things. Please don't be confused. These are not LNAs, or excuse me, not LNAs, LPNs. They're not physicians. They're not folks that practice at that level. These are folks that do functions that are mostly just very repetitive and specific and applicable to mostly machinery and other type of things. So other states don't license them at all because they're just performing a job within that, and then like I said, they work under a licensed provider who's required to supervise them.
Follow up? Well, where does the bill say that it's repetitive work like that? That it's not those things
Well,
that you're saying?
What it unfortunately is lines 3 through 5, which is a mass of RSA references to those type of specific job functions.
Okay.
They're just not defined out. They're just referenced.
Oh,
You're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Dr. Sherman.
Thank you, Senators. And for the record, my name is Senator Tom Sherman, District 24, 11 towns on the Seacoast, and I would like to speak in opposition to the repeal of the Board of Registration of Medical Technicians. My partner and I, Hillary Tompkins and I, were sitting one night in our offices looking at 2 cases of jaundice in 80-year-old patients. And the diagnosis that we came up with was acute hepatitis C. In over 20 years of practice at that point, I had never seen acute hepatitis C before. We usually see chronic, somebody who had shared needles in their past or tattoos back in the 70s and 80s. Bottom line was Hillary was straight out of her training and she hadn't seen it. So we started going through the charts together and we found a common thread. It was that they both had exposure to the cardiac cath lab at our hospital, Exeter Hospital. We started looking a little more carefully and we realized that immediately we realized the implications of this. This was clearly a case of some kind of exposure. The FBI was involved, state agencies, and in the end, there were 32 patients that contracted hepatitis C at Exeter Hospital, including, as you probably know, Senator Reagan's Sam Cataldo's relative who died as a result of that. Senator Cataldo was hugely in favor of this bill. This bill was brought by Republican House members, and we worked very closely. Some of you may remember we had a sergeant who was from Stratham, who was a House member, a sergeant in the New York City Police Department as a part of this. And in the end, in all those investigations, including a steering committee that was statewide and involved everybody, but really a lot of work on the part of DHHS investigation, what we identified was that Kwiatkowski, who was the one who actually did this, had been at 17 hospitals before Exeter nationwide. It had never been reported through any of the available databases. Really, the only one was an association of radiology technicians or something like that. And he was a temp who had come to Exeter Hospital. He was very beguiling. Everybody liked him. But exactly what Senator Ricciardi was describing took place. He was alone in the room with a patient, with their IV, and with access to fentanyl and Versed for the radiology procedures. And he diverted that fentanyl and Versed into himself, mostly fentanyl, and then reused the needle on the patient. That's where the exposure happened. And he did this, according to the federal attorney, putting at risk 8,500 patients. One of the remedies that came from all of those people working on this was to close this gap very specifically of medical technicians who have access to controlled substances and patients. And Senator Ricciardi is right on target. You could just be standing in the room, but as long as you have access to those 2 entities, you are part of the risk. You're not being, well, technically, I guess you're being supervised by somebody with a license, but there is no record of you or your behavior or any infractions or any disciplinary actions nationwide or statewide until we put in place the Board of Registration of Medical Technicians. Outbreaks have continued in other states that have not done this. But since we did this, we have not had an outbreak that can be attributed to drug diversion. I fully support the original intent of the bill, which was to change this as we just did. I don't know why it wasn't before you all, but we're doing it with one of the radiology boards to an advisory board. My worry is that if we send this back to the House with that change, they will change it back to a repeal, and then we'll be in a committee of conference. I think that we can fully staff the Board of Registration of Medical Technicians. I think that if we do not allow it to continue, by the way, it's not licensure, and it's not certification, it's not a competency board, it simply logs in that you are registered in the state of New Hampshire if you are in this discrete category that has access to patients and opioids or controlled substances. And to Senator Prentice's point, this is inside the state very protective. We had hoped that it would be adopted nationwide. In fact, we made national press when we did this, but it hasn't. I don't know why not, but the feeling that all of us had, Representative Copeland was the detective from New York City. Some of you may remember him from Stratham. This was a bipartisan effort to make New Hampshire the safest state in the country to prevent drug diversion, which affected so many people and resulted in illness and death. So I would ask you, number one, please do not pass this bill as it currently is. I would be okay with it going to an advisory board, but I worry about what happens when it gets back to the House. And this is about protecting the people of New Hampshire. This is about making sure we don't have any more outbreaks as much as we possibly can. This is a very specific, this is like a scalpel blade rather than a sledgehammer. That's what this board was designed to be. We spent 2 years on the definitions trying to get it just right. And I think it's worked well, except for the staffing issues that Director Courtney will be talking about. So it took a lot of work, a lot of thought, and the fact that we have not had any more outbreaks shows that at least it may be working. But you take it away and you put us back in the same situation we were in prior to the outbreak at Exeter Hospital that Hillary and I discovered. And believe me, it was beyond painful. People died, people got sick. We had 80-year-olds we were treating with medications that had about a 60% chance of efficacy of getting rid of their hepatitis C. The side effects of those drugs were horrific. Now we have better drugs with over 90% efficacy. That doesn't diminish the risk if we get rid of this board. So I'd ask you to please not allow this repeal to move forward. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Minahan.
Good morning, everyone. For the record, Paula Minahan, Senior Vice President, State Government Relations for the New Hampshire Hospital Association, representing all our hospitals in the state. We do have concerns about House Bill 330, and I won't repeat everything that Senator Sherman said, but as you know, it does repeal the requirements of certification and registration of med techs, and we do not support this. We support the original bill as, again, outlined by Senator Sherman, so again, I won't get into that. We do not believe repealing the board is the right approach, and we believe maintaining a medical technician registry is an important tool for supporting patient safety by vetting individuals that have access to controlled drugs in a healthcare setting. Again, I won't read my testimony, but you have it for the record. I will actually, in the interest of time, just basically indicate that I would support going back to the original bill, but again, not support this bill. We do believe it jeopardizes the safety of our New Hampshire residents, and thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for the last time today. My name is Ross Connolly. I'm the Deputy State Director for Americans for Prosperity, New Hampshire, here to voice our support for HB 1330 as amended. I'll be brief, don't want to be repetitive in respect of your time, but the way we view this is the license is very superfluous to the practices that have changed within hospitals and within healthcare facilities, addressing the issues that came out of the incident of Exeter. And we believe that has been the best and most effective approach. More background checks, training, private certification. These have been very effective tools to ensure that an incident like that doesn't happen again, and is what similar tools are used in the 49 other states that do not license medical technicians. So we believe having that extra hurdle is just yet another sort of superfluous step to somebody entering this field. And we believe that the incentive is within the hospitals, within the healthcare facilities, to ensure that these things are not happening, and that the employees that are being hired, that background checks occur, that people are checking up on employment history. These are normal processes and hiring processes. And so for those reasons, we do recommend that the committee move this bill to pass, just for the nature of yet another barrier standing in the way of somebody entering a healthcare field that's struggling for workers.
Questions? Denise?
Thank you for taking my question. I'm going to follow up on something Senator Sherman said. So what is your opinion if the recommendation is an advisory board? Is he accurate that the House would turn around and just repeal it? Or do you think that would be a very good compromise? Because I understand the barrier about shortages and work, but you can't compromise safety for any reason.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I would absolutely agree. Our view is that the safety and risk is being covered by those individual employers, and that's why we view the license as unnecessary. I can't comment what the House position would be or what they would do. However, moving to an advisory committee, that's still a step in the right direction. Just maybe not as impactful as getting rid of the license entirely.
Thank you.
Senator Reagan, may I? Thank you again for sitting before us today. So I just want to point out that without this, if it were to go just back to the employers, they don't always have ways of communicating with each other when these kinds of things happen inside the walls of a hospital or any type of healthcare facility. I know because I worked in an emergency room that had a problem with actually travelers in the older days and diversion. And so without this level of oversight at the state level, I believe that we'll continue to have the public at risk. And this is a way that we've stopped it. So I just want to share that with you. We put it back on the hospitals and the healthcare organizations. As good as they are, there's not always that way. There needs to be an independent party like the state protecting the public in these situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And just to go back to a previous point by the representative who introduced the bill, that this is a policy that's only in New Hampshire, so you don't get a lot of the cross-border stuff with other states. So getting basically it's based on the policy of the hospital to call old employers if they are crossing state lines, because there aren't these advisory boards or licensure boards in these other locations. So this is specifically to New Hampshire. That's why we think, having national standards and complying with those so that hospitals are following up if somebody's coming from another state, so we avoid these issues.
Thank you. It's in-state as well, so I'm not just speaking about the out-of-state piece. It's hospitals and healthcare organizations within New Hampshire's ability to communicate on personnel-related matters, and what if they don't? I mean, I just think the independent piece is necessary. I wouldn't say what if they don't. There's a personnel practices I don't think we can get into here, and that's why we have these boards. I also think that every other state in the nation actually should do this, and it should become an interstate compact, and we should have the highest level of public safety in this area, just like we do for EMTs, for nursing, for physicians. So again, thank you for your position. I just wanted to share this and put it on the record. Okay?
Thank you, Senator.
The hands. That'd be good. Thanks, Ross. With our hands. I know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindsay, wrap it up.
Take it home, Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, again, Lindsay Corney, Executive Director of PLC. The agency does not take a position on 1330 as amended, but I did want to note that diversion is an ongoing issue that happens in this state. Based on our research, anywhere between 15 and 18% of healthcare workers will have a substance use disorder at some point during their careers. Additionally, we get complaints on a very regular basis regarding diversion. Licensure and registration is certainly one way to respond to issues of diversion. Of course, there are certainly other ways to do that as well. But I wanted the committee to be aware from our perspective that diversion is still a problem in New Hampshire. OPLC does certainly support the original bill, which would convert this board to an advisory board. This board has not met since February of 2021. So effectively, there is no actual regulation that's occurring right now, which is a huge concern from a public safety standpoint if the general court has determined that this registration is necessary in order to protect the public. So again, we don't take a position on the bill as amended, but we would definitely support the bill as originally introduced, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So,
thank you, Senator Reagan. Thank you, Lindsay, for coming before us. Quick question: have we relaxed the either licensing or registration standards for any other healthcare profession? Because when it comes to, like, say, as serious as this, because of the workforce shortage.
So that's difficult. I think what we need to do in New Hampshire, obviously, is recognize we have a significant healthcare workforce shortage. That licensure is a barrier to workforce. And that's the very purpose, right? We want to put up a barrier and make sure that the people who are coming into the state to practice are competent. But I think we need to look at both process and criteria. I'm not aware of changes to criteria other than the recent authority that the office was granted to issue temporary licenses to out-of-state workers. But what the agency is really focused on is process. Is there a way that we can process these licenses more efficiently so that we can bring in the workforce in an expedited time frame? Because other states are doing it, in a 24, 48-hour time frame, whereas for some of our boards, they take 60, 90, 120 days, which is really unacceptable when you have a workforce shortage. So that's what we're looking at. I'm not aware of any changes to criteria except the temporary licensure.
Just quickly, I think it was this committee heard a bill to allow for, say, a longer reentry period. Like if you had been a nurse in the past, you hadn't been one for, 5 years, that you could, it changed the reentry process, but it didn't relax any of the safeguards. So I'm just trying to make a distinction between those, so for a reason.
Yes, absolutely. I think that we absolutely need to be vetting the people who are, they're in safety sensitive jobs, much like, airline pilots and truck drivers. I mean, they have access to controlled drugs, people in healthcare facilities. So certainly we need to ensure that they meet the minimum standards for both competence and also that they're in an appropriate state to actually carry out those functions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator Reagan. I'm good.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, do you want me to make a speech?
Wait, 2 hours for it.
What is gonna?
Okay, adjourned.
I second.
Oh, yeah.